Well, hello and welcome to the second webinar in our social enterprise series, co-hosted by the United Church's Edge Network, as well as Small Business Solver. I am really excited to be here today with Peter Miller, who is going to be presenting on building successful teams. This series is being accessed by all sorts of people involved in social enterprise and social innovation, which are areas that Peter is very closely connected to and has a wealth of expertise and knowledge in. So we're thrilled that you're here with us today, Peter. Thank you so much. I see a few people joining us now, so welcome. For those logged on live, we know some will be participating live for these webinars, and many, many more will be accessing them after the fact. For those of you who are logged on live, you can ask questions and comment at any point during the webinar in the chat box. This is a place for dialogue and discussion. You should be able to see and hear Peter and myself, as well as the PowerPoint slides. However, we cannot see or hear you, so we'll really rely on that chat space for any discussion and dialogue today. And as I mentioned, of course, this webinar is being recorded. So Peter Miller is our guest today, and I'm just thrilled to be here leading this webinar with him. Peter worked for CIBC for 27 years before he took early retirement. And 2 years ago, Peter re-retired and has continued his role really investing in new leadership and particularly in mentoring. So he's been involved with Futurepreneur as a mentor and with Junior Achievement with the Be Entrepreneurial program, and focuses on supporting incubators. Peter is currently working with Dr. Julie Lin Wong to help her build her business infrastructure for 3D4MD, a very unique company that uses 3D printing to print medical devices and accessories to be used both here on Earth as well as at the space station. So a very neat project that Peter is involved with mentoring and really supporting. And in addition to this project, over the past years, he's coached 8 social enterprises, so has a ton of experience in this area. And today we'll be presenting particularly on the aspect of what it means to build successful teams. So Peter, thrilled to have you here. Welcome to those who are participating live. Please, at any point throughout the next hour, type your questions and comments, and we will be sure to get to as many as possible. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you now, Peter, to get us started. And I'm wondering if you can just kind of talk a bit about what we're going to cover today and where we're going in this next hour.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. So my name is Peter. For anybody who wants to ask a question, you're welcome to do that. One of the biggest problems that I've noticed over the years with the 720 startups and a number of social enterprises and charities and non-for-profits is the challenge of building a team to support what they want to do. A lot of people have tremendous ideas on how to give back to their community and participate with them. So today what I want to take you through is a process to show you how to build that infrastructure to support what you're doing.
Fabulous. And so do you want to start us off by talking a bit about, you've kind of mentioned the lack of a team infrastructure is one of the biggest problems that you see in terms of getting social enterprise off the ground. What should a team look like in terms of how to go about building that?
The first step is defining who you need for that team and developing a position description. And that may sound very simple, but it does take time to do that. One of the critical factors in developing that position description is to make sure that you include 4 or 5 key benefits to being involved. A normal position description does not include benefits. Benefits can include networking with other participants and volunteers on the team. It can include receiving a testimonial from the organization or a letter going to the boss of the organization. There's learning that can be developed that can go on a person's resume and provide information that supports them looking for a possible new job situation. So it is a process, and as an organization, you have to define what you need first. Second step is to recruit that team, and you can do that in many different ways. Some of your team are going to be paid, some are going to be volunteers. So it's a combination of both. And what you have to do is you have to look at different sources that you can use to recruit people. So, for example, on the volunteer side, there's Volunteer Canada, there's Charity Village, there's Volunteer Toronto. There are volunteer centers right across the country. And to give you an example, I worked on the Special Olympics for our high school students, and that was held in Oshawa. And my challenge was to find 400 volunteers to support the Special Olympics. So I approached unions, I approached the Board of Trade, I approached the city, etc. And within 2 weeks, we had 175 volunteers that had signed up.
Wow. And so that was just by spreading your net really widely and reaching out in the
Yes.
best capacity.
And a lot of it was cold calls. It wasn't to people that I knew, because I didn't know a lot of people in Oshawa. Another example, of course, is the Pan Am and Parapan Games from about a year ago. And in that case, they recruited 23,000 volunteers. And they did it in a very unique way. When you applied, you had to submit your resume, and then you had to answer 10 video questions. So they videotaped the answers to those questions, and then they transferred them to different departments within the Pan Am Games. And then you were contacted where there was a fit to your skills, which was kind of neat.
Right.
So the second step in that process is the training. And the training step is orientation to the organization and what the organization does. And that can be, then it can be skill-based training to support that. In many organizations that I'm working with, a lot of that training is now done online.
Right.
So, for example, I'm a disaster management volunteer with Red Cross, and I would say 85% of our training is online in terms of videos and text. With another organization, we do that training on Skype. So with 3D for MD that you mentioned earlier that I'm working with, we did a 2-hour workshop with students in Bangladesh to show them how medical tools and accessories could be printed out in Bangladesh in rural communities and in hospitals. So training is obviously a next step.
Right.
One of the big challenges is retention. And retention, you can get very high turnover unless you look after the people that are volunteering to work with you. And you can do that in several ways. You know, it can be something like a letter. Congratulations, thanks for your help. It can be a pin, it can be an award, it can be different things. But there has to be ways to retain those people and thank them and recognize their contribution. The last step is recognition. And recognition can be in the form of a conference where they stand up and they're recognized. It can be a video conference. It doesn't have to be a live conference. It can be a certificate. It could be a pin that goes on their shirt. There are many different ways to recognize what an individual can contribute to an organization. So in a way, those are the 4 key steps to look at when you're trying to build this team to support what you're doing.
Right.
And one of the things I think that's important to recognize is a lot of people come up with an idea by themselves. And they try to run that organization and set up that organization by themselves.
Mm.
And in my experience, there's a 95% chance of failure in doing that. So what they really have to do is spend the time to build that team around them to support what they're doing.
And you recommend doing that right from the ground level up, right?
Right from the get-go.
Yeah. And so what about some, a social enterprise that is, excuse me, just starting and might not yet know kind of who some of those key players are that they need to be drawing in or linking into their team? What's the best way to go about the recruitment process, or things that should be flagged or aware of to be broadening the network in a way?
Well, if we could go to the next slide, Lauren, that might help
There you go.
explain it. When somebody has an idea, that idea should be developed as a solution to a problem. So you have to identify that problem first and who is impacted by that problem. What you have come up with as a social entrepreneur or an existing organization, a B Corp or a not-for-profit or a charity, is hopefully you have investigated that problem and you now have a solution. So a third step in that process is to validate that your solution meets the need of that community and that somebody is willing to pay for it. Now that could be the user pays, it could be subsidized as somebody else pays part of it, or a sponsor or an organization or a foundation that will pay the full amount. So once you've completed that 3-step process, then what you want to look at is, okay, how am I going to take my little idea and make something out of it?
Right.
And the first step is to try to find a small group of 3 to 5 people. And I've labeled them here as the core group. So these like-minded people get together and they start to flesh out that idea in terms of a little more detail. Because when you first come up with the idea, that's okay, but you need to clearly define that solution to the problem and how it would impact the parties involved. So once you get that together, the next group that you're going to look at is staff. And staff could be people like an executive director or a project manager. Either one of those people could be part of the staff team. Another person that could apply to the team could be a virtual assistant. A virtual assistant is somebody who works from their home, and they could be a student, they could be a retiree, they could be somebody on mat leave, or other reason, who would like to fill in a few hours a week, say 15 hours a week, and get paid for it. but they can do it all on a virtual basis, so they don't have to physically go anywhere.
Right.
Another group on the right-hand side are the paid advisors. The paid advisors are people like a lawyer, an accountant, it could be a web designer, it could be an insurance person, it could be a banker. And all of these people are paid, and you have to take that into account when you're first starting that social enterprise. The next group that you're looking at is your unpaid volunteers. And when you look at unpaid volunteers, you want to have some of them who are there on a regular basis and some that are there on an ad hoc basis. So you don't have to have them all set up in committees and organizations to support your social enterprise. For example, on the next part of that slide, patrons. Patrons are people who really like your idea. They are senior people in politics or corporations or government or nonprofit organizations that are willing to lend their name to what you are doing. So, for example, I was involved with an organization called Justice Net, and one of their patrons was a former Governor General of Canada. And a lot of these names show up on a website and on letterhead, and they may door open to other organizations, but they're not actively involved on a regular basis. So they really add credibility to the social enterprise. Then you look at having a board of directors. And when you look at a board of directors, we'll get into this in a little more detail, you start out with an operations board of directors, and then you move to a governance board of directors. Ooh, fancy terms. And then you set up 1, 2, or 3 boards of advisors.
Okay.
And I'll explain more on that in a minute.
Okay.
And then committees, mentors, and ambassadors. So it really is building that team. And you can do that over a year. You don't have to do it all at once. You start with the core group, and then you build it from there.
Okay. I mean, it feels like a lot of work to get the right people in the right places, and that infrastructure built. So I imagine as you start with the core group, then different people from that core group can take on different responsibilities of working with the employees, say, or the unpaid volunteers.
And they help recruit and refer people. That's one of the key things.
Right. So shall I go on to the next slide here?
Sure.
Okay,
yes.
Perfect.
Okay, so here we go. Here's all of these fancy groups, which have fancy titles. And once again, I would encourage anyone to kind of build this in steps. So the core group, as I said earlier, is between 3 to 5 people who are like-minded, who share some of the ideas of your group and can help flesh out in a little more detail what your solution to the problem is and how you might go ahead achieving that solution or implementing that solution.
Right.
The next group are employees, which are really staff. I should change that word, because these people, the executive director, the project manager, and the virtual assistant, would be contract employees as compared to full-time employees.
Okay.
And as the organization may grow and and may evolve into full-time employees. But initially, I would recommend a maximum of 15 hours a week for each of those two positions.
Mm.
And the hours to be worked out between the core group and the staff people.
And the advantage of having two people in smaller houred contract positions as opposed to one person with more hours is the functionality,
Yes, exactly. Exactly. You don't want an executive director doing administrative tasks at a lower level when they should be working at a higher level. But you also need that administrative support in order to make the organizational functional. So the next position is the paid advisors. And this is where you want to seek out referrals to a banker, to an insurance person, to an accountant, to a lawyer, to a website designer, whatever the group that you need, but you're going to have to pay them. And that's very critical. But you want to set out what your requirements are for those positions. What do you expect from them? You want to interview them just like an employee. You're paying them. And they've got to meet your requirements.
Right.
And if they don't, you do the Donald Trump. You fire them. And you get a new one. So the next group are the board of directors. And initially what you're looking at is a chair, a vice chair, a secretary, a treasurer, and you may have one or two additional directors. And what I would recommend is that they be in office for the first 2 years.
Mm.
And they're going to start out in operations. So they're going to be actually doing things to support the organization. They're taking on tasks. They're opening doors. And that's a key job for the board of directors, is opening doors.
Mm.
Because many of those directors will have a network. So, for example, I have about 450 in my network. And if somebody says, I'm doing this, bingo, I start to think, who can I refer them to?
Right.
And once I send it out to my network, they each have 200 in their network. So that's 450 times 200, which means you really get the word out.
No kidding. Yeah.
And if you're looking for directors, do it on a referral basis. Now, as I said there, it's operations, but it's also governance. Governance has become extremely important in the social enterprise and the nonprofit and the charity world in terms of governance. And what do we mean by governance? It's making sure that things are run from a policy point of view, from a fiduciary point of view, meaning financial, and approval of, say, part-time or full-time staff, as well as determining the strategic and business plan direction of the business. Patrons, as I said before, are people of influence. And they add their names because they support what the organization is doing. And they really like what the organization is doing. They may write a letter. I would not hesitate to ask them to write a letter that you could put on their website that shows their involvement.
Hmm.
And I would also ask them to consider opening doors for you.
Right.
The unpaid advisory boards, these could be in different areas. So one could be a group of clients or customers. and it's getting their feedback and suggestions. Another one could be a professionals group in your area of expertise that your social enterprise needs. A third board could be a business advisory board. And what you do with these boards is you meet once a month for a maximum 25 minutes online to discuss a problem or an opportunity.
Hmm.
And I've been setting up these advisory boards for the last 12 years, and they've really made a difference to organizations in terms of what they're doing.
Can you say,
So,
a bit more about the maximum 25 minutes?
yes, let me give you an example. That's the easiest way. My last business was an online business simulation for students across Canada, US, China, Singapore, Switzerland, India, and China. And so I said to my partner, who was up in Parry Sound, I said, hey, we need a little bit of input to make what we're doing better. So we set up a student advisory board, a faculty advisory board, and a business board.
Huh.
So for the students and the faculty, to give you an example, we would call them together once a month and we'd say, okay, what do you like about the simulation? And they would talk back and forth and bounce it off each other. And then a second meeting would be, what don't you like about the simulation?
Hmm.
And a third meeting might be, what would you like in a new simulation?
Hmm.
So we not only asked them for that 25 minutes so that we would not encroach too much on their time,
Right.
but we also asked them if we could contact them by email or by phone or Skype for 2 emails and 2 voice calls maximum per month. And by getting that feedback, we were in the marketplace. We were knowing what our competitors were doing. We were knowing what our customers wanted. And it made a huge difference to actually running our operation.
And keeping the calls or communications shorter and less of a time commitment, say, I imagine also allows for a more focused engagement. So I appreciate that you say, one of those calls is just going to be about what's working for you. And we're going to talk about what's not working next week or in 2 weeks. Like that's a separate thing.
Yes, each time we send out an agenda in advance. So it's important, and it might be, say, a 3-line agenda just describing the problem or the opportunity situation.
Right.
So they were focused very clearly on what we wanted to cover at that situation. So that was, like I said, that is working extremely well. And there are benefits for both the owner of the social enterprise and for the members of that advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, for the owner of that social enterprise, number one, they get free advice and information. Number two, they get sales, leads, and referrals.
Right.
And number three, they have credibility because they put these people's names and their titles and the organizations they work with on their website. For the advisors, benefits include networking with the other advisors, getting sales leads and referrals. The owner of the social enterprise could send a letter to their boss saying, hey, John has done a great job, really helped us. And that goes into his personnel file. It makes him look great with his boss. Or he gets a testimonial that could go on the website. On the website, the contact information is free. So you put their name and their contact information. So it's a free ad for them.
Right.
So there are specific benefits for both the owner of the social enterprise and for the advisor. And that's what makes a difference.
And so what about committees?
Committees, once again, it's something that you would develop over the year to get stuff off the board of directors. And it could be, for example, communications, marketing, uh, promotion, media, all of, and sales could be one committee.
Hmm.
A second one could be finance. And by finance, I mean financial forecasting, financial sourcing, where do you get money from, and financial reporting and control. Another one could be HR and volunteer management. And another one could be operations and technology. And what you want to do is try to find an individual that would chair that committee.
Right.
And then others who would like to join because of their expertise. And here's the key thing, Lauren, that to make those committees viable, there are some people that will want to do this on a fairly regular basis, 2 hours a week or something like that. But there are others who just want to do it once in a while. So they'll get a task or they'll get a project and they'll contribute in that way. So it's having that two levels
Right.
of committee members that really makes a difference.
The what's your advice on kind of the same people doubling up or multiplying up in different roles? So having someone who's part of the core group and both also an employee and also part of a committee. Would you advise towards or against that?
Well, the core group is there at the beginning. And after a period of time, they're going to evolve into either the board of directors
Right. Okay.
or the advisory board or a committee. So they will disappear. The staff members, no, they should not be part of the committees.
Yeah.
They might be there to take minutes. Same with the board of directors. They have a different role than a committee person.
Right. So keeping those
And
roles
so,
really clear.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of the committees, you mentioned, that could be done over the course of a year, say, to get that set up. What would
Yes.
you caution against allowing the setup of any of this infrastructure to take longer than a year? Like, why is a year kind of long enough, but not to go longer than that?
Well, I think each organization, it's going to be different.
Right.
There's no one size fits all. For example, one organization might work on marketing and finance, and the others take longer to set up because they see those as their priority.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what you want to try to do is set up that committee structure because then you're spreading the word. You're
Right.
building your brand awareness in the community that you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the advantage. It's the networking, it's the spreading of the word that makes a difference. And the more people you can get involved to help you do that, you're also going to get turnover.
Right.
And turnover is a given, even though you want to retain as many people as you can. It's going to happen. So by having some people there, hopefully somebody can step up if somebody has to leave because they're moved or their job condition changed or something material made a difference.
Yeah. So continuing with the roles and responsibilities, let's talk about the ambassadors and the ambassador teams.
This is a fun one. Some organizations look to scale what they're doing beyond their local community. And if they are selling, say, in several communities in Ontario, or if they're selling in different provinces, or like 3D for MD, we're looking to do that internationally. It's setting up a person or a team who can represent you in another community.
Hmm.
And what that means is that person or that team are responsible for making presentations, connecting to organizations who could be partners or affiliates. That team can also help identify potential financial supporters. That team could also help with the recruitment of people to be on the committees or even the board of directors. And that makes a huge difference. So an organization that I work with was called About Face, a great organization run out of a lady's basement with 2 part-time employees and herself. And they help people with a facial difficulty, a facial problem. And they do that on a national basis. So I met with her and her chair, and we went over some of the stuff that they were doing. And I said, well, I'm going to throw out a little challenge for you. I want you to have 600 volunteers by the end of the year. A big gasp. Yikes! And what I want you to do is I want you to think about where you could set up ambassadors and ambassador teams
Right.
across the country that could tell people about your vision, your mission, and your passion for what you're doing, and spread that word on a broader basis so people are more aware of the number of people that have facial disfigurations and how they could be helped. And they said, yeah, we get it. We're excited about doing that. So the last group are mentors. And mentoring has become a huge area across Canada for many organizations. And it's helping people in many different ways. So, for example, I'm a mentor with the Mentoring Partnership. And that's for new Canadians who are seeking a job in Canada but don't know the culture, don't know how it works. So, for example, right now, I've got a gentleman that I'm mentoring who's 3 months into Canada, and he doesn't understand Canadian culture or the Canadian business area. So, depending on the nature of the social enterprise, mentors can play a huge role in helping the customers, the clients that the social enterprise may be serving. Now, something that unique with Futurepreneur and with United Church, the network that's being set up on mentors, is training of the mentees as well as the mentors. So the mentees have to know what to expect from a mentor.
Right.
What they can do, what they can't do to help them. And mentors can be generalists, or they can be specific subject matter experts. So there's those 2 levels of mentors. And once again, the mentors need training, and the mentees need training. So it's an interesting area. And all of those roles and responsibilities are areas where people can learn new skills that they may not currently have right now. And that's one of the advantages of joining a social enterprise and being part of it.
Fabulous. So, in terms of these next slides, they kind of go over a bit more about what you've covered, but I want to talk a bit more about advisory boards.
Yeah, but the advisory boards, that first step is to identify what do you need
Hmm.
for a board? I mean, do you need one board? Do you need two boards? Do you need three boards? What do you need? From from my experience, the number one board is your clients and your customers.
Right.
If you don't get feedback from them, if you don't get suggestions, they can come up with great ideas that you haven't even thought of. That can be a brand new service or product or program that can make a huge difference. So once you identify what you need and you've defined them, then you recruit them.
Right.
And you get them to sign a confidentiality agreement or an oath of confidence. So two times signed. As I mentioned earlier, there are benefits to both the owner and to the advisor. And these have to be outlined because you're really selling people to be involved. And you would like to ensure that all aspects are covered and that they see that they're going to get something out of it.
Hmm. So, can you talk a bit about a guide for setting up an infrastructure such as what you're outlining here? I mean, as you've gone through each of the roles and responsibilities, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I can see how these pieces fit together. But I imagine for some owners of social enterprises, like where to even start, and how to go about each of the steps needed to implement an infrastructure such as this, which really, I mean, reminds me that the the role and the responsibility is so big. Um, and so having a really clear focus to get that off the ground. What guide would you offer?
Okay, what I'm talking about here, Lauren, is a document that outlines for the organizations
Hmm.
what are their policies, processes, procedures, and forms in all the areas of the social enterprise. So for 3D for MD, I'm, I have so far a 50-page document that's the guide for all of these areas in
Okay.
all of the different aspects of what's happening. So that's it's the marketing, it's the finance, it's the operations, it's the HR. And so the whole concept here is it's a reference guide.
Hmm.
It's not something you read. If you're having trouble sleeping, yeah, then you pick up the guide and it'll put you right to sleep. No problem. But it's trying to have everything in one place and change it as you need to
Yeah.
or add to it as you need to.
Hmm.
But it's very clear that so I'll give you an example for 3D for MD. One of the things that we're working on is building a 3D for MD global humanitarian intern community.
Hmm.
So in order to do that, we have to set out some policies and processes, procedures, and forms. So far we have a US team of interns, Canadian team, a Bangladesh team, and we're looking at a team from India.
Hmm.
And these interns will connect via Skype or other method once a month, share ideas and information, and learn from each other.
Hmm.
But we have to have the guide that clearly sets out the policies, the processes, the procedures, the confidentiality, and all of those aspects. So once again, that may be a year-long project that somebody takes on. And there are actually businesses out there that hire people to do this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So it's possible that you might be able to recruit somebody. But there's a ton of stuff just through a Google search on human resource policies and processes and procedures and forms. So it's not like a lot of that information isn't available. It just needs to be adapted to that social enterprise in
Yeah.
terms of what they're doing.
And I mean, as you say, there are companies that can be hard to do this work. I also know from experience on boards of directors that I've been on, there are particular people who are very skilled and proficient at this type of work. And so making sure, I mean, like all of the roles and responsibilities you've outlined, making sure the right people are in the right places
Right,
with this piece as well would be really important.
right.
Yeah. How
Yeah,
much
yeah, go ahead.
how, as the organization evolves, how much would a guide like this be organic, or would it be try and keep it static? So you have your policies and your procedures that are kind of guiding you forward as you're changing and evolving, or do you want that to be adapted as you're going?
Oh, it's definitely not. It's not. It's like a business plan,
Yeah,
and I've worked with over 2,000 business plans. As soon as you do a business plan, it's obsolete.
yeah,
And then you try to implement. No, this has to be something that continuously evolves and should be challenged at least on a quarterly basis.
hmm. Okay,
And one of the terms that I like to use in the R&D in business, do you know what that stands for?
research and development.
Okay. In social enterprise and small business, how about rob and duplicate?
Ah, okay,
So if a similar social enterprise is out there and they've got some very good ideas,
yeah,
and there's one in Australia, there's one in New York, there's one in London, England, take some of those best practices, put them together, and make yours better.
hmm.
And that's how you can update the guide based on what others are doing.
Yeah. Wise advice indeed. Some of the wisest mentors I've ever worked with, their number one piece of advice has been, don't try and start doing it from scratch. Like look at first step should be looking at where there's something similar and what can we draw from that. Yeah.
Yeah, best practices, you know, outstanding star people in the world. Hey, they've gone through what you're going through.
Absolutely.
Why not take some of their ideas?
Yeah.
And a lot of organizations are willing to share. So it is not something that you may find that difficult to send an email and say, hey, you guys look like you're doing something really great.
Hmm.
Would you be mind sharing any of your documents?
And is it your sense from working with thousands of businesses, as you say, that most people are quite willing to collaborate and offer the resources that they can?
They are.
Mhm.
They are. And the problem is in Canada, we're not very good at asking.
Huh,
They will never share those ideas.
huh.
My wife is American, and she doesn't hesitate to ask at
Mm.
all. So I've learned from her that I no longer hold back. I ask,
Okay.
and I would encourage any social enterprise to ask.
Mm.
I mean, what's the worst they can say? No.
Right.
But guess what? There's somebody else out there you can ask.
Hmm. Yeah.
So along the line, you're going to get help.
Fabulous. Fabulous. So I wonder for our attendees who are logged on live right now, if there are any questions that you have for Peter, maybe thinking particularly about uh, your own place of experience or social enterprise with which you work, and what you might like or need to know from Peter today. And I wonder, Peter, as we see if there are any questions that pop up, it kind of we've covered this fabulous outline of an infrastructure. What are the last words that you want to leave with us for anyone who's going about starting to build a team for a social enterprise?
Well, I got to put my professor hat on, and it's all about learning outcomes.
Mm,
And in terms of learning outcomes, it's taking the time to design and build that infrastructure, and then to execute that infrastructure. One of the key persons might be a volunteer manager to help build that part of the infrastructure where they're volunteers. And that can be a big help.
mm.
I think the other thing, Lauren, is that I'm going to provide some documentation that will be incorporated within this video, and people will be able to see that documentation, and that will help them as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So for those of you who have registered and signed up for the webinar, we can send out an email with that. And we'll also, in the recording of this webinar, include images of those documents. Peter, Josephine has a question. Josephine is wondering if you could say more about how to find unpaid advisors and ambassadors. Could having an open house information session to invite potential helpers be a helpful first step?
First step really is defining what you need.
Hmm.
So once you define what you need, and then you can communicate what you need, then you spread the word to your network, to organizations. It could be the Board of Trade, it could be a union. It depends on what your social enterprise is. What you will find very quickly is that the word will spread very quickly, what you're looking for.
And have you,
And it's,
oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Have you seen something like an open house information session used, and whether or not something like that would work? So you're not only spreading the word, but you're then creating an environment in which people can come together?
Okay, two aspects, and I want to go back to the college environment. One, Humber College has volunteer management program.
Hmm.
And one of the things that as a social enterprise you could do is you could post a job with them. So right now for 3D for MD, I've posted a job for a volunteer manager. And I'm hoping that their second and third year students
Right.
will take that on as a project.
Hmm.
There is Seneca College has a nonprofit leadership program, which I was part of, and they did, and I did strategic management and project management.
Hmm.
They have their students go out once a week to work on a project for 2 semesters.
Wow.
So I would recommend contacting the head of that area, the nonprofit leadership program at Seneca, and you get some free help in either of those two college situations. And there's other academic institutions where you can get that kind of help to take you through a situation
Hmm.
where you can recruit the right people at the right time.
Right. So thank you, Josephine, for that question. It sounds like, Peter, your advice would be rather than starting with something like an open house, looking at places like colleges that already have some of those networks and learning environments set up and tapping into that.
And the resources there. I mean, Humber also has a fundraising group
Right.
where they train people on fundraising. So you can, if you link in, you might get help
Mm-hmm.
in terms of faculty as well as students. And that can be pretty cool to help.
Great advice. Great advice. So we just have a few minutes left. I wonder in those last few minutes, Peter, if you could give us a bit of insight into some of the the things that you've seen as a social enterprise is setting up an infrastructure like this, what are some of the biggest mistakes, I guess, that you see being made that we can try and avoid?
I wouldn't say it's a mistake. I think it's more um, getting help
Hmm.
in building a team. Trying to do it by yourself, you have a high chance of failure.
Right.
If you can put together that team, get them to sign the confidentiality non-competition agreement so you protect your idea and what you're trying to do. But build that team, and they will come up with sources that you hadn't even thought of. So financial sourcing, everybody assumes it's fundraising. It's multiple sources, multiple revenue streams that you can attack. It's looking at products, it's looking at services, it's looking at programs, and looking at events that your social enterprise can offer.
Hmm.
And by having that team in place, they will expand those ideas and show you how to build the structure so it's sustainable. And sustainability of a social enterprise
Hmm.
is one of the biggest challenges. And that's where a team can make a huge difference in making that happen.
Thank you so much, Peter. Yeah, indeed, we are stronger and better when we work together and don't try and do it all by ourselves. Hey,
Right.
yeah. Well, I want to thank Peter so much for taking the time to be with us today. This webinar has been a really helpful resource. I hope for those of you who are joined in live and also for many, many more who I know will be accessing this recording after the fact. Peter is going to send me a few documents, which we will insert into the recording of this webinar. So those will be helpful resources, hopefully, for you to follow up and get a bit more in-depth information on some of what has been shared today. Josephine has just said very helpful. Thanks. So thank you, Peter, and thank you to our participants today. And I look forward to many more of these webinars in our social enterprise series that we're really just getting this series off the ground. So we have our third webinar in this series later on this week on Thursday at noon. And I'll be joined by Gary Brown, who is talking a bit about strategic planning and kind of, I think, will couple quite nicely with what Peter has shared today around building teams. So I hope to see you all for many more of our webinars. Please check out the Edge webpage for the full listing, which will be evolving as we get more and more sessions ready and lined up for this series. So thanks so much, and especially thank you so much to you, Peter. And have a great day, everyone. Take care. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, well,
I'm just gonna there. You should be able, Peter, just to log out by closing the window. And if
yeah,
you are able to just send me those documents,
yeah,
that would be
will do.
fabulous. And thank you so much for taking the time today. This has been awesome.
Okay, take care.
Talk to you soon. Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.